In this first demo, we're going to start with a very simple app that does not do any MVVM nor any data binding. First, let's see it running so you can visualize what we're going to build up to. This terribly unsophisticated app loads up some data at the beginning, puts it into a data entry form. We could then go in and edit any of those fields and click on Save to save the changes back down to the database. Now let's talk about the structure of this app. The ZA dashboard here is the WPF application project itself. Now, the ZA comes from the fact that the sample data I'll be using throughout the course is based on a pizza ordering domain. So there's a database with tables for customers and products and orders and so on. We have a data layer here that's pre-populated using Entity Framework DB Context and a set of model objects including customers, orders, order items, products, and so on. So in addition to the raw data access that's up in za.data, in the client services layer, you can see we have two repositories, a customers repository and an orders repository. And if you look at the methods on these repositories, as I just talked about in terms of async, they return tasks for their invocation. So these are set up for doing the task-based async of .NET using the async and await keywords. They're also interface-based in the vein of testability of MVVM. The idea is that your view model should only depend on the interface of their dependencies and have a substitution path so you can pass in mock objects that implement that same interface for unit testing purposes. The implementation of these repositories is basic CRUD data access through Entity Framework. We have a DB context. We're doing queries with a to-less async to get the task-based async. We're doing adds and save changes and making modifications and save changes and so on. Again, you don't need to focus on this code, it's all provided to you. It's not the focus of this course. The key thing is that we have repositories that expose a task-based interface for the view model consumption. Now, in terms of the functional code of the very simple screen that you saw, we have a main window that has an instance of a user control in it. For demo purposes here, we're hard-coding up a customer ID that we're loading from the database. Obviously, in a real app, you'd have to have some navigation or selection mechanism to pass that as context into the view. We'll see how that works later with MVVM in other demos. The view implementation is down in this customers folder, and it's really just a simple user control with some layout using a grid, and then some inputs that have labels and text boxes, and you can see each of the inputs has a name to it. Likewise, our save button down at the bottom has a click handler. So it's traditional WPF user control development, where you have to put all the support in the code behind of the user control. Here you can see we're newing up an instance of the repository. And when the loaded event fires, we go out and we get our customers asynchronously. Notice the async and await keywords here. Because this returns a task, you can await on that task, and the execution of this method will be sequential from the code declaration's perspective. But this method will go and execute potentially on a separate thread and then return the value back onto the UI thread since that's where it was called from. So it makes it so all the execution within the context of the view or the view model stays on the UI thread. Now, if you don't use data binding, you can see it gets very mundane. You have to go and grab discrete values out of properties on your model objects and stuff them into properties on individual elements that you're referencing by name here in the code behind your view. And then when you go to save, you have to go pull those discrete values out, put them back on a model object, and then you can go ahead and try to persist with that model object, or call some business rules, do validation, whatever's appropriate. So you get this kind of grungy push-pull code that you have to do without data binding. In the next demo, we'll quickly see how this evolves by using data binding.